Katlego, over to you.
Thank you, Brian. Welcome, everybody, to the South African chapter of Catalyst 2030. We welcome all of you for joining us, and most especially for making time for our session. In our session today, you'll be learning and finding out about the amazing work that some of the members of our chapter institution are doing. And as the theme for our conference is going for this week, Solution from the Frontliners, you'll hear of the amazing initiatives that are brought together by some of these amazing and brilliant colleagues of mine. But before we do that, let's quickly just run through some of the house rules. So I'm going to ask that for this particular process, be kind. If you are joining in, please be on mute. And I'm going to ask everybody to just have their videos off. And the attention would be predominantly given to those who are presenting, so that it's able that we're able to, without any particular disturbance, be able to give them the platform and know exactly who it is that is talking. So please, number one, for those who are on the platform, please keep your video on if possible. Show your name and the company. And all of those who are also joining in, it would be nice to have your names written on, so when the question and answer session comes, we are able to just be able to call you by name. Unmute when it's your opportunity to speak. And if you have any particular question, please use the chat box. When the time comes, you'll then also get an opportunity to raise your hand, and then you'll be given the opportunity to request to ask whatever your question would be. Whilst we are on that one, I'm going to once again welcome everybody and give over to our co-chair, Linda, to do the official welcome. Over to you, Linda.
Thank you so much, Katlego. Welcome to the Catalyst 2030 South Africa chapter Catalyzing Change Week event. My name is Linda Kuvea, and I'm the co-chair together with Colin Haberton. Today, we're going to be using this Catalyzing Changing Week event to just showcase our members' amazing work. I will share more about what we're doing and what we're working on as a chapter later on. But just to welcome you all, and hope you will enjoy this time with us. But for now, back to you, Katlego, so that you can take us through the rest of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Linda. So we're going to jump straight into it. And how we're going to do it is, I'm going to ask first and foremost that all the presenters who happen to be members of the South African chapter to give a bit of an introduction. Give firstly your name, which organization you're on, and the amazing initiatives that your organizations are doing. And then on that, I'll be giving each and everyone an opportunity to do so. And then what we will do is that then afterwards, we will then have any questions and answers to the speakers. And this is so that we can work on at least saving a little bit of the time. So I'm going to ask all of those who are joining us, if you have a question, please note it down. And then once we are done with the presentations, we will then be able to come back to the questions and the remainder of the sessions. So I'm going to ask in the following order. The first speaker is going to be Nontando. The second speaker will be Tracy. The third will be Laura. The fourth will be Linda. And our last speaker for the day will be Robin. And of course, I'm going to ask our other co-chair to prepare just a final close-up for the session, and that's Colin. Nontando, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nintendo is unable to join today due to another engagement that she has. So I've just been asked to attend this meeting on her behalf and just find out if there's any information that I do need to filter back to the organization. So I wasn't aware of a presentation, but while I do have the floor, I just thought I'd introduce myself, and then if it's okay, if we can move on to the next person. So to everyone else, I am Lauren Marie. I work at the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation in the Public Affairs and Communications Department, and I'm responsible for all externally facing communication as well as the implementation of all of our advocacy and thought leadership work of the organization. Thank you.
You're muted. You're muted.
Apologies for that. I think then for the next one, I will just move on to Laura Berg. Laura, over to you.
Thank you. Firstly, apologies from Tracy Gilmore. She's not available till this morning. She just sent me a WhatsApp with a very big face saying they've got no Wi-Fi this morning. So she's very sorry that she can't be here at the session. Okay, so I am the Chief Enabler for the Green Light Office, and we hold space for the Green Light Movement, which is a group of organizations, about 130 of them, that use the social methodology and metrics called the Green Light Approach. And what we do at the Green Light Office is we really assist organizations to measure, understand evidence, and articulate if they're actually moving that needle of transformation and hitting that sweet spot of social impact. We've been going for about 8 years, and we've got over 40,000 assessments in our system, many of them longitudinal, which means they're over a year long.
Thank you, Laura. And then I'll move over to Linda.
Thank you so much, Katlego. I'm going to share a presentation of a project that we have done here in South Africa on innovating agricultural systems for smallholder farmers in Limpopo province. But before I do that, I'm just going to introduce the organization that I work for. It's called DRIASACO, and it's a think tank and a social enterprise that works using futures thinking and systems thinking to design impact projects, undertake research, and also develop strategies for mostly nonprofit organizations and social enterprises. So I'm going to share my screen now and share with you part of the work that we have done in Limpopo. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So we were contracted by the municipality in Makutudamaga in Limpopo to conduct a feasibility study and develop a business plan to guide smallholder farmers to transition from their current subsistence farming practices to commercial farming. And in order to do this, we decided to use the methodology of systems thinking before we can actually get into the work of developing the business plan. In the municipality is situated in Sekhukhune district, municipality of the Limpopo province, and it has an agricultural economy mostly dominated by large-scale commercial farming and poor smallholder-based production system, which is located in the deep rural areas. And the majority of these smallholder farmers are disadvantaged and mostly face various challenges ranging from low production, poor access to land, poor access to inputs and credit, among others. And there is a policy framework in place in South Africa, the Agricultural Policy Action Plan, which provides guidance for the development of agriculture sector by promoting sustainable and inclusive growth. And this articulates measures to support smallholder farmers in the country. And it also includes measures to increase access for them to credit and financing, to improve rural infrastructure, and to provide technical support and training to small-scale farmers. We also have the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, which is also there to promote smallholder farming because it requires government entities to prioritize the procurement of goods and services from small, medium, and micro enterprises. As we were doing this work, we realized that good policies do exist. We have challenges though in implementing them because of inadequate funding and political will. So there's some critics also around trade policies, saying that we're not doing enough to address the structural barriers that smallholder farmers are actually facing, which is limited access to markets or access to resources and insufficient support for agro-processing and value addition. So before we started this work, we decided to do a systems map. And the reasons why we did this systems map was to understand the dynamics of the system, including the interactions, the social, technological, economic environment, and political factors that affect the growth of smallholder farming in the municipality. We also did this so that we'll be able to present a neutral view of a system that actually incorporates multiple perspectives from active stakeholders in the smallholder farming system. And we also thought that it would be good to present the relationships, the forces and the feedback loops among actors and elements within the smallholder farming system in the municipality. And this mainly also at the end to help us to review some leverage points for intervention to facilitate the transition from smallholder farming practices to commercial farming. And the methodology that we used was really participatory, and it allowed the inclusion of different and many voices. The primary phase of the project was devoted to collecting and processing of quantitative data and material that was available from secondary sources. And this was coupled with a secondary phase of qualitative data collection, mainly from literature review, from focus group discussions, workshops, and ethnographic studies. And this investigation was informed by key stakeholders and personnel involved in the project, including the smallholder farmers themselves. And to ensure that the business plan will incorporate systemic intervention, we also conducted a series of systemic design workshops, which incorporated various systems thinking tools and canvases with stakeholders. And the workshops were useful in understanding the deep structures, the dynamics, and the overall functioning of the smallholder farming in the area, and also for identifying the gaps in capacity and skills to inform the interventions that we're going to recommend in the business plan, and also to collect insights that could help to build a value agricultural model with an ecosystem of actors aimed at tackling systems level issues. Okay, so this is the map that we came up with, and it's a really high level map. It might not be as detailed, but for the purposes of developing the business plan, it was quite helpful. I'm just going to try and show, I hope it's going to be visible. I'll try to zoom in so that we can all see some of the elements that I've already alluded to here. So you'll see that, for example, here we have, okay, I will try to focus so that you can be able to read this. Okay, so for example, we have the inability of farmers to adopt new practices and technologies. We realize that smallholder farmers actually don't manage to get the access to information and knowledge around new practices. And this has an impact on the quality of their produce and an impact on their access to markets. And it's also caused by the lack of information on market prices. And then there's also limited access to funding and credit for agricultural development, which I mentioned earlier on, and lack of promotion of entrepreneurship and business development for farmers. But like I mentioned earlier on, we needed to identify the deeper structures of why farmers were facing different challenges. And maybe just to give a little bit of more background, there was a cooperative that was formed some years ago, and this cooperative actually failed. So we were also trying to get a deeper understanding of what could have gone wrong and what could be corrected in order to come up with a viable business plan. And what was quite interesting in this research was that we realized that social factors do play a very key role. I mentioned a lot of issues earlier, like policies, like access to finance, access to information, but we realized that there was poor communication mechanisms in the previous cooperative. And if you look at this area, you'll see that there's a lot of R's here, and R's stand for reinforcing loop, meaning that all these elements are causing each of them to actually exacerbate the issue. So poor communication mechanisms in the cooperative also leads to conflicts among farmers and unequal power dynamics between cooperative leaders and farmers, and lack of clear rules and regulation within the cooperative, also leading back to conflicts among farmers. And from another canvas that we used, where we used the iceberg model, we actually realized that using the behavior over time graphs, we realized that there was a particular time when these conflicts would actually rise because, for example, when it comes to harvest time and selling time and profit sharing became a really conflictual issue. This is where most of these conflicts would actually arise. And there's also a lack of capital among social capital among farmers. So that lack of trust when people are working together within a cooperative, we also realize that it actually caused many challenges for them. There's so many other issues here that I may not be able to go through this particular presentation, but also there's issues related to traditional land use practices, which in turn cause gender inequality in accessing land, finance and market, meaning that the participation of young people and women in farming is also affected. And then leading also to lack of collaboration among farmers. So this map is really high level and just an overview to show us the problems that the smallholder farming system in Makutadamaga municipality were facing. And this is what helped us now to start identifying the points in which the municipality needs to intervene the most, and the recommendations for them to actually start working on a viable business plan. Yeah, I think this is all. It's very impossible to present the whole map here. It's, as you can see, it's a lot to talk about, but what is important is to see the interconnections among the issues that the farmers are facing and what was actually causing them to fail. So the business plan now that we developed has pointed out the leverage points that we picked up from this particular map so that the farmers can actually succeed in a new phase of cooperative farming. Thank you. Thank you, Katlego.
Thank you for that very detailed presentation, Linda. Truly amazing work that you're doing. It's indeed indicative of the solutions that are being brought forward by people like yourselves, the frontliners, and I'm truly excited. Also because we are joined by multiple peoples. I can see some of the people in the chat box who are also emanating from various spaces such as grant making and in the funding space. I am going to give over the last and final presentation to Robin. Please take us over.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katlego. Thank you, Linda. That was actually such a beautiful segue for me, because it just really laid some of the issues that cause problems for us when we want to step into collaborative work together. And it articulated them so beautifully and made them visible in such a beautiful way. So thank you. And welcome everybody to the space, and particular thanks to my colleagues from EdEco Connect that have joined us here as well. Perhaps just for us all, this Catalyst 2030 space is a phenomenal network of networks space for social entrepreneurs to connect, to share their experiences, their thoughts, the work that they do, to find the opportunities for for spontaneous collaborations, as well as for facilitated collaborations. And it's just a delight to have everybody in our South Africa chapter space, and hearing a bit about some of the South African, by no means all, but some of the initiatives taking place in the South African landscape. So my name's Robin Whittaker, and today I'm joining you to share a little bit about EdEco Connect, the EdEco Connect initiative, which is an initiative taking place specifically in the South African education and learning landscape under the auspices of, it's a network entity, so it doesn't really have a structure or an organization that it belongs to. It belongs to all of us. But it's being supported by the Department of Basic Education's E-Cubed program, for which we are very grateful. So I wanted to share a little bit about the evolution of this initiative over the past 2.5 years. I'm going to share my screen. I'll try and make it as fast as possible so that we have plenty of time to just engage in conversation. There's an incredible group of people in this room, and it would be wonderful to hear from us all. So yeah, just a quick overview. So what I am very interested in is not, do we need to collaborate? Not how complex is the system, because we know the system is massively complex, but how? What is it that actually creates environments that foster our capacity as human beings to work together well, to share our work, to engage with the complexities that come into play when many people in the same system, often with access to the same resources, start to think about sharing work. And a number of us who feel similarly really decided to experiment a little bit with what would it take specifically around learning in South Africa. And we started an experiment called EdEco Connect. And our goal with this experiment is really to see, through experimentation with each other, what happens when we build a strong relational ecosystem. What happens in terms of our capacity to be able to work well together, and to create co-created work. I don't know. So we used initially ULab 2X, which is a Theory U program. It's a very, very pragmatic, practical curriculum to take large groups of people through an understanding of the complex systems that they are part of in a deeply immersive way, and in a way that allows them to create shared understanding. What our hopes and goals have been for this space is to really cultivate fertile ground, which supports the conditions for us connecting, which allows us to establish and deepen our levels of relationship and trust. And our intention has not been at any point to build relationships merely for the sake of work or projects, or to come into this space together with a very specific goal around a project that we have to co-create or co-work on together. But rather it's been to dive very deep into the substrate of how we relate to one another, of our ability to engage in dialogue, to co-think together, to collaborate, to care for each other's work, and to deepen the levels of our relationships. And the point of the work that we might do together, so the point of any shared work that we might do together, is really to focus on generating further resilience for our relationships. So in other words, we haven't entered into this space to generate relationships in order to do work. We've entered into the space in order to pay attention to our relationships and to appreciate that any work that we do together actually offers us an opportunity to even further deepen our relationships in all the complexity that is often entailed in that. And so I guess the fundamental here is, if we think about at an individual level, the success of an intervention lying in the interior condition of an intervener, then for the collective, the power of this process emerges from the presence and the gifts that the participants bring into our shared space. What we are really hoping to do is to experiment and practice with a conceptual thought around learning ecosystems and how existing education systems can be transmuted, transformed into learning ecosystems, how we can move from a hierarchical structure into a structure of connection and fluidity that's relationally based. And where we can really draw on all the resources available in an environment to facilitate excellent learning and thriving childhood experiences. And so the learning ecosystem model that I'm sharing here is one that in another project I'm involved in the NetEdu project, a way of articulating how do learning ecosystems evolve, looking at the concept of natural ecosystems. So appreciating that you can't just transform from one structure to an entirely different one. There is a process that needs to be attended to of laying down the fabric, of laying down the conditions, and of creating levels of relationality that allow for not only the nodes to be mapped, but the in-between spaces to be attended to, the flow of relationship within those networks to be attended to, so that what we map is not static but dynamic and allows for dynamic movement and dynamic shift to take place. And so this is just a very brief sort of overview of the Theory U curriculum. It really is a long-term process, which this group has now been through twice, and which we continue to embody, of shifting ourselves collectively into a space of open mind, open heart, open will, going down a journey of discovery as to what the system that we are participating in contains, how we perceive it, where the energy lies, where the opportunity lies, where the leverage points lie, and then landing in a space together where we can really reflect on that and start to feel the emergence of what the system wants to move towards, and to understand how collectively we can seek to be in service to that. So a lot of our work focuses on how we pay attention to each other, how we pay attention to the stakeholders around us in the system, how we pay attention internally into our own organizations, and really shifting ourselves into capacity to be present with open heart, open mind, open will. So just in terms of some of our thinking, and this is co-reflective, it's what we as a group are starting to perceive from this experiment is important. And so what we're really starting to pick up is that in facilitating this ecosystem capability, this relational substrate that allows us to step into co-creative work together, our attitude, our approach, and the culture that we build together is extremely important. So we speak about the role of invitation, how we seek to create inspiration, how we engender agency and ownership, how we create motivation so that we can co-create. And essentially what this is about is really stepping into the humanization of our shared spaces and paying attention to how we deeply humanize our ways of being together. Just a super quick overview of how we are experiencing and seeing this community development progression. We started initially with convening, just gathering a group of interested stakeholders, people who were keen to experiment and try. We connected, we spent time, effort, and energy continuously and consistently connecting. We then started to understand what might it look like to collaborate, to cooperate with each other's work. And we then moved through this ULAB phase, through this phase of really deeply immersing into the system that we participant in, starting to share thoughts about what matters to us, what our purpose is, what we see the potential for. We started to really see these opportunities for co-creation. So collaboration is almost bringing two existing pieces of work into partnership. Co-creation is taking those two capacities for work and seeing how they might become in service and create something new for what is wanting to emerge from the system. And really this is done with this repetitive, consistent desire and will to deepen our levels of insight and to humanize the ways in which we are engaging with the system that we are part of. And really what we are at the point of now, 2.5 years in, is that we are starting to see the emergence of this possibility of a thriving learning ecosystem. Spontaneous collaborative opportunities arising, spontaneous co-creative opportunities arising, where this space that we have created is not controlling or managing those opportunities. It is simply facilitating our capacity to see the potential, and through the consistent attention to relationality and trust is giving us the wherewithal to step into that together. So our dream, sort of what we see and we think we would like to continue experimenting around, is this progression over time of a culture shift towards a nationwide learning ecosystem culture. This is not a quick process. This is a slow process. And it's not about scaling of a particular approach. It really is about the diffusion of a capacity for us to hold relationship with each other and to pay attention to one another and to the system that we are part of. So put another way, it is in terms of learning, because we're specifically looking at learning and education with this experiment, it is to see how do we really transmute the current system that we are part of and bring in all of the potential stakeholders and resources around that system to support it and to open access to deeper levels of learning and more effective levels of learning for our children. Again here, another way of visualizing it. How do we bring multiple stakeholders? And here there are 5 strands listed, but quite frankly, this is an evolving landscape. How do we really continue to welcome people in, to welcome stakeholders in a way that supports our best possible thinking together and allows us to coordinate our responsiveness to the learning ecosystem that we're trying to create. I'm going to just move through that a little faster because I think that that's just a bit much now, but just really to bring us here to this point, which is, and this is still from a little while ago, some of these reflections, but they're the ones that I had easily for a slide. But just some of the reflections that have come through from these extremely diverse stakeholders. I mean, really in this space, we have stakeholders who are cited within the Department of Education, stakeholders who are in union spaces, educators teaching on the ground. We have funding partners, we have corporate partners, we have lots of NGOs and NPOs and civil society actors, but it is an extremely diverse group of people. And what is so powerful is that really our experience has been this. We are together in this. What it is that we are doing will emerge, but the fact that we can be together in this space and think together and pay attention together really is what creates the possibility for everything else to happen. So I'm going to stop and just hand back to you, Katlego. And if there is an opportunity later, it would be amazing if some of my EdEco colleagues could just share a reflection or two of their own from the space that we've created together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I'm very much interested and I'm intrigued by your particular goal from convening, how you were able to move from just convening to deepening insights, you know, getting people together, and then the end goal of how we create that getting together into real insightful learning. So thank you very much for your presentation. I had made a bit of an error, and I will take that to account myself. I had initially started by requesting the speakers to introduce themselves, and they went right in and already started with the presentation, which works best in my time. So because of that, we had one student, and I'm sorry for calling you a student, Laura, who obeyed with the rules. So I'm going to ask us that we give Laura a chance to go through the presentation. Over to you, Laura.
Thanks. I won't keep you long. It's amazing, you know, this group, this system of South Africans are, sorry, after both what Linda said and Robin said, I feel quite emotional because, you know, Linda spoke to the hands, to this deep analysis, this creating a framework that would allow people to really see things and to be able to bring their hands to the table to provide solutions to meet those issues and challenges that have come out. Robin's talking about heart stuff. Oh my gosh, you can't get deeper than what Robin has spoken about. I am blown away about how she's used the U-shaped presencing to bring about and the patience to bring about through trust and respect. Absolutely amazing. So you've got the head, you've got the heart, you've got the heart, you've got the hands. And what I wanted to bring a little bit was more on the head side. So I just want to very briefly show you a high-level helicopter of some of the information that's coming out through all of this aggregated data that we're getting from the green light movement and some of the insights that are coming through. I'm not going to go into any detail. It's just going to give you a little whiz around to show you some of the stuff that's actually coming through. So I'm going to just share my screen with you right now. Okay, can you see my screen? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so the kind of things that we are bringing out of the aggregated data from the Green Light movement is we're starting to really understand what are the main challenges in most families right across the length and breadth of South Africa. We're also understanding that there are very different occurrences and happenings in the different provinces. And so we have to take cognizance when there are programs that are being run, what's different from Gauteng to Limpopo to Western Cape, etc. And it's amazing what we're coming through specifically in the different provinces. So we're getting a really good insight about Gauteng area, what's happening in the Cape Town area. We know from Durban and Pietermaritzburg what's been happening with them, and even in the Eastern Cape, the flavors of what people are trying to do, the challenges they're trying to overcome, and some of the nasties, but also some of the real positives that are rising up. Then we're starting to understand some of the more thematic things, like what has contributed most to the micro-entrepreneur, trader, or self-employment resilience. In other words, from the programs that are working in that particular space, what is coming through so strongly that is working, such as mentorship, social networking, customer care, supportive families at home, the capacity to plan and budget, and willingness to take well thought out risks. And we've got all the qualitative data that's backing this up. We're starting to understand what empowers entrepreneurs. What do they need most? We're understanding what's empowering youth. What do they need and what are they struggling with the most, and the recommendations that we can put into place. We're starting to understand around the rural areas, how they need to be supported and the ecosystem around them to gather up and be able to co-create along those journeys. We also understand over the last couple of years how the data has regressed because of COVID and what that actually means, especially on the financial impact and the resilience on the majority of South African families. And then the social impact, that the echoes of COVID and what that has done to South African families and the battles they've had to face to get over what COVID has landed in their laps, and how do they rise out of that now. We also have a really good understanding on the support staff, all the coaches, mentors, nonprofit organization, counselors, people out in the field. What is it doing to them? How have they been traumatized over the last couple of years? How are they having to reset the ground zero so they can work upwards again in the support that they provide? We know what South African families want to disclose or not disclose, and how to start breaking through those taboo areas that they don't want to talk about. And then we have a whole lot of insights, main insights that we are getting very specifically from right across South Africa around what's working, what's not working, etc. And I'm just going to, I don't want to actually take you through these. I know they're really interesting, but there was one main one that came out in one of our final insights that I just love, and it's this one, that there appears to be a trend throughout all our green light data, that in South Africa, it's the older women who show great perseverance and hold themselves accountable within programs. They're the ones who appear to be willing to just hold on and see where the journey of change takes them, and to really sacrifice, compromise, put in the hard work, their own sweat capital, to getting where they need to be. They're the ones who show the least attrition in programs. So those are the kind of things that we're just picking up. And I just wanted to whiz you through and just show you the kind of things that at the Green Light office that we're picking up from all of this incredible aggregated data coming through the Green Light movement, which then allows us to feed that back into the Green Light movement, which they can take and explore and run with it. So I'll stop there.
Oh, Nora, thank you so much. Indeed, you have cemented the process in how it has been flowing from the heart to the soul and to the mind with all the other presentations that have been coming. And what a better way to put all of this into a form of storytelling. And so we have Warren Lodge, who has just joined us. And he's from Life Brand. He's going to be giving us a little bit of a presentation or talk about storytelling. This will just sum it all up. Warren, are you ready for us?
Hi, Katleho. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I appreciate your time. So yes, I am Warren. I'm from Life Brand. Just to tell you a story to start off with, I started off my career by studying marketing. And in my third year of study, I actually entered a competition called Marketing Student of the Year, sponsored by a local media company called Naspers. And I was lucky enough to win that competition. I think all the smart kids might have been sick that day on the date of submission, so got my entry in. And I won my regional competition, and we all flew up to Johannesburg for the main competition and presented our concepts for supplements to community newspapers. And I didn't win the overall competition, but I won Class Clown, which is, I think, quite a worthy statement. I actually won the Networker award. And probably because I've got my mother's genes and I'm just talkative, but essentially I see myself as a creative and a storyteller, and that sent me off into a career in advertising. And after a while, I felt like I was facilitating other people's stories, brand stories that I didn't necessarily believe in, and when you work for a big corporate, essentially you're an order taker. And so I worked in advertising and I learned a lot. I got to sit in boardrooms of the biggest brands. I was responsible for looking after half of the advertising agencies in Cape Town and all of the advertising agencies in Port Elizabeth and Durban. And in certain instances, actually sitting in the boardrooms of organizations like Unilever and looking at the strategy and just being on the cold face and feeling, wow, like in terms of media owner and advertising, I'm reaching like quite a good point in my career, but underlying, I had this uneasiness that I was working with brands that sort of didn't gel with my core belief system, and in the early age of about 30 something, early 30s, I started studying branding at Vega, my honors in branding, and I learned about the power of story and the power that narrative has in order to influence behavior, to influence change. And when you can influence behavior and change, you can influence culture. I read a stat that if less than 5% of the culture are influenced, it can have a knock-on effect, and it can have huge ramifications in terms of changing the trajectory of how culture is shifting. And so I was studying brand leadership, and I realized had a bit of an existential midlife crisis, in my 30s, and realized, do I want to work on promoting brands that I don't believe in for the rest of my life, or do I want to work with brands that are making a difference? And I resigned from my cushy job and I founded Life Brand in 2013. And we are essentially a brand agency that works with brands that are changing the world for the better. So with organizations that yourselves are mainly involved with. And And in the early days, we actually rebranded a lot of organizations. It still felt 10 years ago, working in the branding and marketing space with nonprofits and developmental organizations, it felt a little bit new to be in this sort of sector where, you know, people would say, you know, marketing and branding and professional storytelling and videography, you know, that is meant for the glitzy brands, for the brands with big budgets. But I knew I was onto something. I knew that there was a shift happening, and that shift has probably happened more on an international level, but it was starting to happen at a local level, where brands realize that you're not necessarily competing in the space. You know, if you're all trying to do good for society, but you do need to differentiate, and you do need to find your own unique selling point, and you do need to understand who you are and your purpose in terms of the pool of organizations that you work within, as to differentiate and find your own unique space. And something that stuck with me is that a brand is an impression in the mind of your stakeholder, and you need to occupy that space. That can be a positive space or a negative space, and or a neutral space or a non-existent entity. But if you look at what some of the great brands are doing, and we get some of the corporate brands for, you know, how they represent themselves, and we take nuggets out of that and we use it with the brands that are driving change in the world. But if you look at a brand like Apple, you'd see that every time you encounter the brand, every brand touch point is consistent, and it is professional, and it's slick, and it's similar. And so you start to create a perception of that brand in your mind. And it's all about consistency and coherency, professionalism, and it's not necessarily the obvious brand touch points like your business card or the signage in your organization or your annual report design, but it is how your phone is greeted. It is how your brand promise is fulfilled and upheld within every single interaction, every opportunity that organizations that, or the general public or government or beneficiaries have to see and to touch and to experience your brand. That is what they will encounter. So I don't necessarily want to just speak the entire time. I would like to show you some examples, and I would like to just share, show you a bit of a intro into Life Brand, just a bit of a show reel. So I'm hoping I have sharing rights on my side. If not, Kahleko, could you allow me to share my
Yes,
screen?
Warren, you can share.
Thank you. Please flag me if you cannot hear the sound.
No sound.
Okay, let me try and fix that. I think for the sake of letting this meeting flow, I'm just going to share the link quickly with Katlego. And Katlego, if you can please just share this video on my behalf. Thank you.
Okay, you can also share it on the chat box so that everybody can have it.
Okay, I'll do that. But if you could play the video, I'd appreciate that.
Perfect. I'll do that.
Today we
Yes, we can hear.
Okay, the sound came through.
Okay,
So you
wonderful.
can just play.
Okay.
This time around, there isn't any sound.
I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
Stefan, do you want to share the video? There's 2 videos to share on your side.
Let's try this out.
If it's not working, we can carry on.
As soon as
I
you
seem
hit
to be
the share,
struggling
you
with
just go to the
so-
3 dots and then put share sound. It has to have the share sound enabled, but
Why
Okay,
don't we
I seem to be
try-
struggling with it. So maybe what we can do now is, Brian, I'm going to ask you if we can have you play along with this and see if you can share it. And then for now, we'll start opening up the discussions. So if anyone may have had any particular question or any feedback for any of the speakers, please, this is your opportunity to do so. To just go ahead and affirm them in that regard. I've been seeing a number of chat messages. Not sure, Brian, do we have anybody who's helping us with that? Or should I just go through the chat box?
Yes, we have someone who's going through the chats from our team. They'll be able to share blurbs from our end, as well as any questions are arising. They'll be able to forward those questions to you.
Thank you. I would appreciate, I've been seeing a number of people posting a couple of things on the chat boxes. If we can go right ahead and do that.
Then I'll just go quickly through the comments that are coming in. From Lucy Draper saying, such a clear and heartwarming presentation. Thank you. And also very challenging for people to make the shift from goal orientation to relationship orientation. Again, more or less, Laula, appreciating the presentation by Robin, a heart experiment, that's such huge potential for impact because of the space provided for trust and respect to grow. I would say as of now, what we've received from the chat is more into commentary from speaker to speaker, or from members who are attending, but also other people who are also looking for that kind of collaboration and engagement. I see that some who are sharing their emails before they drop out. Nadia Kist from Nairobi, who's the director for Africa Partnerships for Blood and Water, saying that they offer grants and with organizations on Africa-led CSOs, and they're working on the HIV and WASH related health disparities. So anyone would want to reach out to her, her email is on the chat as well. So
Right.
we'll just continue sharing what we have, Katlago, but in the meantime, that's as much.
Okay, wonderful. And in case anybody else would have questions, please use the reactions button. There's an option there where you get to raise your hands. Most importantly for me is that what the presenters have been able to showcase is exactly what the South African chapter is trying to achieve. What the South African chapter of Catalyst 2030 is trying to achieve is 3 particular goals from the bigger picture of the Sustainable Development Goals. And some of those Sustainable Development Goals, number 1, you'll remember Laura spoke about education, and which is Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which is the provision of quality education. already there is a solution that has been seen in that regard. We see another impact is that of no poverty, which is sustainable development number 1. And then we also talk about decent work and economic growth. This is SDG number 8. The idea behind what we are trying to do as a chapter, or ideally in the big picture of Catalyst 2030, is to bring together all of these initiatives into one space and to be able to see how it is that change is created in community. There is pockets and pockets of change and solutions that are brought about in various spaces. What a better way than to make sure that all of these voices come together and be able to sort of create some sort of a storytelling that we are able to see that are we able or are we achieving some of these goals, which is one thing that I'm truly excited about, especially in having had Warren come together and place all of those in some sort of a storytelling to say, look, there can be many changes that we make, but at the end of the day, what story are we telling? Are we able to look back and say, over the past year, over the past 2 years, this is the kind of change we've been able to implement, and this is the way in which we are able to also help ourselves come together and sort of bring that sort of change alive. Linda started off by having a conversation about farming and how they've been able to find some sort of sustainable solutions when it comes to farming. But one other thing that Linda was able to make reference to was learning from the failures that they were able to implement. And I know that some of the people that are joining the space are either on the initial phases of, coming up with or making their ideas come to life. And how do we make that a possibility? How do you really take an idea from what you see a need and bring it into life? The idea behind this space is to make sure that your story and your initiative is kept together and also is brought together in the same space and harnessed through what Robin is providing, through what Laura, his organization, is trying to achieve, to bring those ideas together to be able to help you sort of feed into the bigger scale of sustainable development goals, but at the same time be able to sort of collect that kind of data that would at a later stage be able to feed into the bigger scheme of things. Then we had Robin, who then came in and told us a little bit about EDCO Connect and spoke about how important it is for them to sustain their hope of cultivating, our fertile ground, how to make sure that we bring about that connection and sustainability in order for us to be able to build long-lasting relationships and also be able to sustain some of those relationships. And then we had Laura from the Green Light Movement, who was able to just lay it out in front of us. And one of the things that truly touched my heart is the initiatives around poverty alleviation and how they were able to also really speak to the individuals themselves. Most of the time, you'd find that people are coming up with initiatives and it's highly at a higher level, but we sort of fail to touch at the bottom level or really get into people's lives and see what these kinds of changes are bringing into space. And she was able to sort of bring about that information that was able to capture some of the data that they've been able to track, especially about how older women, and for me, the doing word was women. If you notice in all these movements that exist, women have always been the ones that are steering across racial boundaries, across border sectors. Women are always the ones that are pushing, especially when it comes to social change. But what particularly struck me, Laura, was the idea that older women are the ones that are finding this almost emergence of wanting to make sure that change is brought, there comes a little bit of maturity with this, but even in the initiatives that we bring, we must also make sure that we also provide some sort of care for those who are older, to be able to, provide some sort of meaning into the amount of experience they've been able to capture. And then we had Warren, who was beautifully able to capture how the power of storytelling can really impact the change into the world. How power of storytelling will be able to sort of bring what you've been able to do into the light, but not just be able to do that. How branding can also be something that can be seen, that can create a perception, that can create the way in which you want the world to see you, and the way in which your change initiative is to be brought into life and therefore be adopted in other spaces for the potential and the benefit of best practices. So I'm going to ask again, if there is anybody in the group at the moment who may have a question. I'm sorry, I'm not so much, I'm not paying much attention into Zoom, so I wouldn't be able to see if there's anybody who has their hands up.
We have hands up from Laura and Linda.
Yeah, and Daisy also had a hand up earlier.
Okay, wonderful. Let's start with Daisy.
Katlego, can I ask maybe that everybody can maybe take put their videos on now, because we kind of passed the, would that be all right? Then we can see each other.
Please. Let's start with Daisy, and then we'll come to Laura, and then we'll end with Linda. Over to you, Daisy.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. It's always lovely to hear from Laura and Robin. It was really interesting to hear from the others. My question is actually mainly for Warren, if that's okay. You obviously seem to have found the sweet spot between sort of sharing people's work, but what are the challenges in this space, I'd say, sort of financially with what you're doing, as in how easy is it to share these stories from organizations without using their budget, and is it something to... So I'd sort of like to hear more about that aspect of things, how you go about developing your work.
Thanks for the question, Daisy. So yes, it's always been a bit of a challenge in terms of budget versus output. But essentially what I've discovered, and I've come full circle, because initially, you want to mimic what you see within the sort of for-profit space. And you want things to be slick, and you want them to be, attractive, and you want your videos to be perfect. But if there's one word that can sum up my sort of understanding of the space now, it's authenticity. So you want to authentically facilitate the telling of stories, and you don't need 4K cameras and drones for that. Essentially, I think where I see a true skill coming into be is in order to facilitate the conversation around allowing those authentic stories to flow through in a way that it is digestible and understandable for the rest of the world out there. At times, if somebody is telling a story within a certain language, you need to facilitate translation or at least subtitles. But essentially, if there's a massive budget constraint, you want to empower organizations in terms of how to do it themselves, and nowadays with cell phone technology and with basic editing software and even unedited software, you need to facilitate how people can capture their stories and upload them and build a community around what you're trying to achieve. And the important thing is to keep your audience engaged or informed or entertained or educated. And so you want to facilitate, even if it's a WhatsApp group, if it's a low entry technology you need to use, it's a broadcast group with regular updates, with regular videos, with voice notes, etc. And over time, you know, you find how you can position your brand within the space. So I hope that answers your question. Essentially, authenticity and using what tools you have and what skills you have. If there's singing, if there's storytelling, you use those skills.
Amazing, thank you.
Thank you for that. Laura?
I just wanted to answer a question here about what makes South African this particular group in Catalyst 2030 a little bit different to the other groups that I've come across working with the other internationals. And that is, I find that in South Africa, there tends to be a lot of courage. There's a lot of courage in South Africa and the people that attend these Catalyst 2030 groups. This particular chapter appears to be willing to take risks, well thought out risks, but at the same time, there's this unusual desire to also see what emerges organically. So not just plot a course, tick off the boxes and go forward and see what you achieve so that your funders are happy or hope that you're going to get whatever impact is that you're aiming for. There is this willingness to take well thought out risks, but at the same time to allow things to actually emerge. And so there's a great heart in South Africa. There's a lot of courage in South Africa. And I think it also comes out about because we have a country of limited statehood. And so government is not playing quite the role that it should, which opens the space, which creates a vacuum for organizations to really get in there, act, get their hands dirty and really see what comes up. But it also means we hit a lot of more challenges and barriers that I think a lot of other organizations do because of this government of limited statehood. So yeah, the word that I can sum up this chapter, I think, is courage. I see a lot of courage.
Thanks for that, Laura. Before I go to Linda, and this is a question that goes to all the presenters, and ideally anybody else who's in the group who would like to answer to it, is about the power of having communities lead the initiatives, like community-led monitoring. How, in fact, my question is, what doesn't work? There are many ways to what works, what doesn't work, and that you would like to share with the others to say, when you come up with an initiative and you think of communities and taking over the initiatives, what is it that doesn't work for that? While you're pondering on that, I'm going to ask Linda to go ahead.
Thank you, Katlego. Yeah, my comment is going to probably briefly answer your question also, which is good. So basically, I wanted to comment to say that the presentations that we had today, I think the golden thread that I could see going through is the fact that we cannot operate in isolation, firstly. Secondly, we need to dig deeper than what we are seeing as the challenges, as whatever goals, if you're focusing on a particular sustainable development goal within your work, there are certain challenges that we can actually see that is on the surface. But we actually need to go deeper and understand what are the patterns that are creating those events that we are seeing as challenges, and what are the structures that are in place that are also making those events to be even more visible. And below those structures, that's where you find the mental models. And going back to what I presented, I just presented one to the systems map, but we also used in the same project the iceberg model. And at the bottom of the iceberg model, we're looking at mental models, which is basically how people think and the culture, the way we behave. So that behavior and where it's coming from, it's all very important. It's linked very much to what Laura and Robin also presented, how people are actually thinking, because it's all starts at an individual level. And because what you see as an individual is what creates your reality. So to answer your question, Katleko, it's all come. We really need to start thinking about creating a shared vision. And how do we create a shared vision? We understand each individual and how they are seeing the world. And everybody needs to understand all those different perspectives. And in my experience working with different groups and giving example of the project that I just mentioned now, we had many people in those workshops, government officials, traditional leaders, smallholder farmers themselves, the municipality officials, all these people have got their own view of the world as individuals. So, but how do you make sure that now we create a shared vision? Mostly by having those conversations, you get to a point where you realize that everybody actually wants to see the same thing. We are basically just seeing things differently, but it is actually possible to create that shared vision. And once you create the shared vision, now you're able to divide roles and say, okay, you are a funder, what are you going to support financially? You are the community, what are you going to bring? And also understand that whatever value every stakeholder is bringing is important. Not only finances are important, because in the case of agriculture, when people are looking at the challenges, they will all think about, the money is not enough. But sometimes you can have all the money in the world and still things might not work. So creating that shared vision is a starting point, and then bringing all the stakeholders to actually play their part towards the particular shared vision. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Linda. I noted that there are some grant making, or should I say fundraising individuals in the space. And my challenge to them is, in answering the same questions, the move, especially in the funding of philanthropy move, has been particularly around the inclusion of participatory grant making models. How do we make sure that we can take what has been presented and ensure that in the way that we give funding, it also becomes participatory in nature? While you think also about that, Robin, over to you.
Thank you. Before I go, I see Moketsi had put his video on. So were you wanting to say anything, Moketsi?
No, Robin, you requested that we switch on our videos. So,
yeah. Good. Well, it's so nice to see you. So, Katlego, just in response, such a beautiful synthesis there. You asked a question about what are the difficulties at a community level. And then Linda spoke a little bit about, in order to work collectively, we first need to step out of our roles, not our perspectives, step out of our roles and enter into shared sense making to understand what it is that actually unites us. What are the not the differences in the specifics of what we do, but the golden threads that run through what is it that we are seeking to achieve. And then we need to move back to be able to step back into our roles and say, and how, from the space that I am, do I facilitate that flow? And I think that asking what is it at a community level when we have community-based initiatives, I think there is something fundamental about people being stuck in their roles, and the work of the connectors is not yet recognized. So weaving work, not the work of building new projects, the work of removing the impediments between people and the understanding that can be reached between people, and weaving together the shared understanding. These are roles that are not yet, they do exist, they just have not been articulated, and they haven't been given formal credence in the systems that we work with. And yet, without that invisible, because it is relatively invisible work, but without that facilitative work to help us generate a really strong shared understanding And more important even than shared understanding, a shared energy and motivation around what needs to occur. We can't get past the specific sites that we sit in. And it's really, really difficult because we're either then forcing change or activating against change, but we are not reaching a point where we share our understanding of what we need to do and what from our respective positions can be done to move us. And the movement is at first incremental and only much later transformative. We're not willing to put in that incremental movement. Communities get stuck because they literally cannot access the networks that allow them to advance their projects because they're stuck in that role. So I think there's something fundamental about, first, let's take off the hats that we wear and let's just step in to seeking a shared understanding. And going back to it again, change doesn't happen. We don't build relationships in order to do projects. So we don't say, well, we've got a piece of work to do. Who are the people that can provide the services I need? Let me go out and build relationships for the sake of the work. First, we attend to let's understand together, and then we step into our roles to facilitate achieving our shared objective.
Thank you for that, Robin. I've taken note of your beautiful answer. Was there any other person who had a burning response? Maybe prior to that, then, in summing all of this up, I'm going to ask Linda to step in. And the idea with summing all of this up is because we have about 8 minutes to go before the end of our session. And the idea basically is around what makes our chapter work and what are the visions that we envision. In fact, what are the goals that we envision for this particular chapter going forward? Linda seems to be experiencing what we all in South Africa know to be our norm, load shedding. So I'm going to give her the platform now to go ahead, just in light of what may potentially happen to their laptop.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, what may potentially happen to my laptop? I don't want to just disappear from here without notice. Thanks so much, Katleko, for the wonderful moderating of our session. I'm just going to go quickly through, talk about our chapter, the things that we are planning, and what you're going to be doing in the near future. So we are a chapter of 65 members and growing. And the most exciting news we have is that we have a new coordinator, Phumzile Mnguni, and she's in the room, I suppose, or maybe not. I don't see her, but Phumzile is going to be onboarded this week. She's still very new and will be introduced to the rest of the chapter by the end of this week. And Katleko, who was moderating this event, has also joined to work with us as our Africa Forward liaison. So basically, Katleko will be holding the Africa Forward pillar, working together with Colin and I as the co-chairs and Phumzile as the coordinator. So there are lots of more exciting things to be going on from now. And we also have planned, together with our community engagement, peer-to-peer mentoring. Laura spoke about mentorship and how it is important to understand that there are people who also care for you, to support you in what you're doing. And to add on to that, we're also going to be adding on the buddy system in our chapter. And the buddy system is basically hand-holding our new members. So if you're not yet part of the Catalyst 2030 South Africa chapter, you are here today, you'll know that once you join, you're gonna have a friend to hold your hand and see you through. And then the most important and probably most exciting, well, everything sounds exciting, but we're going to be having conversation cafes where we're going to be having hot topics from our members, the stuff that they're doing, the new work, the innovations, everything. We'll be talking about it in the conversation cafes. And the first conversation cafe is definitely going to come from the hot topics that came from today's event. So we are very excited that we managed to have this event. Laura and Robin and Warren, thank you for sharing your work. And thank you, Linda, for sharing your work also. So that's going to be our very, we're going to start our conversation cafes from the stuff that came out of this conversation cafe. So I'm just going to ask Katleko, because Pumzile is not here, to just kind of reintroduce himself as our Africa Forward liaison.
Okay, I've got to remember. Yes, I am responsible for that part of the work as we speak to Africa Forward. But more than that, I think what brings me into the space, equally to what many other people in the space share, is the ability to be able to connect. And to be able to sort of build this bigger pool into the bigger, to add into this bigger pool of the knowledge that has been created, so that we are able to deepen the knowledge, so that we are able to support the community, and supporting the community through grant-making initiatives, and deepening the knowledge through to be able to, you know, build on existing and adding onto the research that is currently being generated from our community. But on that, is there anybody else who has a burning question or a comment, or any of our speakers who would just want to wrap things up in the next 2 minutes? I see also, in case you haven't seen it, there's a couple of, Splendor has been able to share some few links on how to be a member in case you're not a member already. And for all of those who are already members, some of the links to being able to follow us on social media, as well as the links to the remainder of the many amazing sessions that are taking place this week. Brian, am I missing anything?
No, Katlego, none that I can imagine, but on my end is just to say thank you to the South Africa chapter. This has been one of those amazing sessions where I've learned a lot, very insightful, so much to take back home and see what else to build up on with other chapters as well. Always impressed with this chapter. And again, just to echo your words, there are so many more amazing sessions happening throughout the week. Please feel free to engage, jump in, listen where you can, share. And one thing that I've taken out of this session is a message that I would want to tweet later on today, which says, you need courage to take your community and moving parts from eyesight to vision. So I hope that the South Africa chapter gets to have that courage. I hope that the members have that courage, so we can start making sure that we can implement some of the issues we see, some of the challenges we see, and not just coming up with challenges, but also bringing into the table the solutions that could change some of the challenges we face. Thank you so much from my end. Back to you, Katlago, to end the session at the preview. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, all of you, for having been able to stay with us up until this time. 1 hour, 30 minutes of your time is truly crucial, and we appreciate it. But the greatest regards to Linda, our co-chair, to Robin, who's been able to make a presentation from EDCO, to Laura from Greenlight, to Warren, most importantly, to you as well, Brian, and your colleague. I do not want to not mention their name. Please help me again.
Splendor.
Yes, it's important to acknowledge people, Splendor, for the work that they do. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Hope to see you all at our next South Africa convening. Thank you.
Thank you all.